Welcome to the Howell Business Beat. I'm Janelle Best. Here we explore business topics such as economic development, leadership, industry impacts, employment barriers, and much more. Joining me today is my co-host, Diane Samples. Welcome, Diane.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
And our guest on our show today is Alan Shevela. Alan is with Aludyne. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, Diane.
Well, we're going to jump right in here. Alan, I'd love to start each show off and give our guests an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, your background. What is Aludyne? What do you do?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right.
I'm the Global Vice President of Supply Chain at Aludyne. I started with Aludyne in COVID in 2020, so as all of us know, just a very interesting time to start a new job. But I've been in supply chain for more than 25 years. I started my career with General Motors in the mid-90s out of college, and I've just grown my career through the last 25 to 30 years. And the opportunity with Aludyne was presented to me in 2020, and it's a Michigan-based company in Southfield, Michigan, which means my commute from Howell to Southfield isn't so great right now with all of our lovely Michigan construction.
It is orange barrel season.
Every summer, right? One of these summers we're going to have a non-orange barrel season, but I've not experienced one of those yet.
I love that wishful thinking.
One of the
optimism,
right?
One of the keys in life is just always be optimistic and positive no matter what. So I remind myself of that daily on my commute to Southfield and back from Southfield to Howell. But at our core at Aludyne, we are a casting and machining company. We're a global Tier 1 automotive company. We supply into all of the Detroit 3, General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, and then most of the European and Asia-Pacific OEMs, BMW, Mercedes, Nissan, really all of the global car companies that you've heard of. We've got 31 global manufacturing sites. We have 8 sites here in Michigan. One of the appeals of me leaving my previous company to join Aludyne was that we are a very much Michigan-based company with 8 of our 31 global sites in the state of Michigan, 15 of our global sites in the United States. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of great new product launches going on, while still trying to maintain all of our current business with all of the current challenges with the supply chain challenges and overall environmental challenges.
Yeah, you started your new adventure during a pretty interesting time, huh?
Yeah, very much so. It's one of those things where, everybody was still at that time, for the most part, working from home in 2020. All of my interviews with the CEO, the CFO, they were all on Microsoft Teams, so I didn't actually meet anybody until day one when I went in to get my computer. Wow. And it was still very much a masked environment, very much social distancing at that time. So to be sitting here with you and Diane and within a couple feet of each other is great to try to get back to some sense of normalcy.
Absolutely. It was an interesting time, indeed. And not only were you dealing with the social distancing piece of it from a supply chain perspective, I'm sure there were a ton of challenges there, which is something that we were going to discuss today. Mm-hmm. As VP of Global Supply Chain for Aludyne, what does that look like? What does your day-to-day look like? I'm very curious.
Whenever I get asked that question, I try to, we talked about always trying to be optimistic and positive, but there's a lot not to be optimistic and positive about. What a VP of Global Supply Chain, me specifically in my role, so I've got responsibility for all of our purchasing activities, direct materials, so we buy a lot of raw materials, a lot of aluminum, magnesium, other ferrous materials for cast iron components. We move a lot of freight all around the world, so by truckload, by ocean freight, by air. Air is never planned, it's always an expedite, which is very expensive. Which, of course, as a Tier 1 automotive supplier, we're not nearly as profitable as we'd like to be. And anytime we have to put parts on an airplane, that cuts into the already very thin margins on the product.
So who makes that decision? Is that like you're like, oh my gosh, we got to get this on a plane. We got to get this here.
A lot of people is the answer.
Okay.
But in the end, the customer says, hey, you've committed, you're going to have parts here. You don't have parts here. Do whatever it takes to get parts here. I don't care if you have to put them on an airplane and lose all of your profit margin on this product. So Those are things we try to avoid at all costs. So that's a big part of supply chain is the planning aspect of it. Mm-hmm. We'd like to ship things by truck or rail if possible. Rail isn't always possible if the infrastructure isn't there. So most of what we ship is by truck. But we live in Michigan, where we just talked about orange barrel and construction season. We also have pretty harsh winters where we have roads that ice over, and if we've got any type of traffic issues. So we're like, okay, the truck should have been there by now. It's not there. At what point do we have to make the call to put an airplane in the air so that we don't shut our end customer down? So lots of fun, exciting things like that, whether it's moving freight around the world or buying very large, multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment to actually cast the parts. So we buy a lot of die-cast machines, a lot of CNC machine centers. And then on the indirect side, just the people aspect of it, whether it's how we run our day-to-day operations. Do we have the right employee apparel? Because in a foundry, we're pouring liquid metal, so we have to make sure we protect all of our employees, keep them safe, wearing all kinds of personal protective wear. So anything under the sun that we buy, it's always a team effort. I always say it's not just me. I've got people that are in charge of each one of the functional areas that report up through me. But every dollar that we spend somehow comes through me. So very, very exciting, very challenging, and there's always something new to learn every single day.
So you're professional problem solver.
I like to tell people that, so,
Right.
and I think that applies to any of us, right? I think all of our jobs. Okay, we have an issue here. Let's put our heads together, and how do we solve the issue?
Yeah, we I don't even know if the story is appropriate, but I'm going to share it.
I love inappropriate.
I love it.
Yeah.
You really intrigued me now.
We used to have these shirts that we got, and they said CAPS team on the back of them, and it stands for kick-ass problem solvers. So
There you go. Yeah,
I need to get some of those ordered.
right?
Both of you need to get some of those ordered.
we need them.
So it sounds like
Absolutely.
you could probably put that in your planning for ordering
Budgeting, yes.
Yeah.
For budgeting, for overall team engagement, team
Yes,
building.
exactly.
Because who doesn't love to be part of solving a problem?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's
And
awesome.
it's job security.
Absolutely.
You always want to be the one that is solving the problems
Yes.
because then you're the go-to person and you're invaluable. Well, everybody is invaluable, but at that point, if you are the go-to person and you're known as the problem solver and you actually solve the problems, then
You are spot on, Diane. You'd much rather be known as the problem solver versus the problem creator. Nobody wants a problem creator.
So we wanted to dive a little bit more into supply chain disruption and, past current trends. This has been kind of a hot topic since 2020. I mean, this is where supply chain disrupted more of our everyday lives. So it was more focused kind of on that forefront and a lot of stuff in the media. I mean, we talked a little bit this morning even about like the toilet paper crisis and all of that.
The fake
the
crisis.
eggs,
The fake crisis.
chickens.
Yes, exactly. So I guess kind of how, and if that impacted you in your role, and if you could shed just some insight on what happened there, what is happening, and how we can work to get through this, because the way that we're seeing it, or at least my perspective and take on it, is the impacts from the pandemic are going to be kind of felt for quite some time.
I completely agree with you. So in supply chain, there's always been minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour disruptions, hence the CAPS T-shirts that I'm very interested in purchasing now.
Well, good. It was worth the share then.
Absolutely. Not inappropriate, all very appropriate for the
Spot
topic we're
on.
discussing. But there's always been issues in supply chain. A lot of those issues have been covered up historically. People would just carry more inventory. You wouldn't have to rush out to the grocery store because you just went to Costco and just bought 100 rolls of toilet paper. But now, with people trying to really manage their budget better, people have gotten on this kick of just-in-time inventory, and we talked about that a little bit this morning. So when people carry just what they need for that day, and especially in the automotive industry, people, I think one of the comments from this morning's session was some of the OEMs carry less than a day's supply on hand. So if you only carry a day's supply on hand, and then all of a sudden the world shuts down, well, that means you shut down later that day. So the big shift in supply chain, specific to automotive supply chain in 2020, was everything came to a screeching halt, and everybody said, "Oh my gosh, when can we get some more of these?" We don't know. For all of us, not just in automotive supply chain, but semiconductors has been a big thing. Whether it's automotive, appliances, any type of electronics has been really disrupted the last 3+ years since March of 2020. As far as we've got this production plan, but now we don't have the inputs to support the production plan. So it's been very challenging. People have been very stressed out. I feel like in every field, not just in supply chain, especially both of you at the Howell Chamber of Commerce thinking, okay, we're an in-person, face-to-face, big event type of organization, and guess what we couldn't do for a long time?
Events.
Get together face-to-face. And even the team building aspect of that. Prior to 2020, people would get together, go on team building events, and then a lot of that really subsided for quite some time. So that had a negative impact just on the people aspect of the business because we weren't meeting face-to-face, and every single meeting was on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever format people were using to meet. But
which is adequate, but in my opinion, just not. It's adequate, right? I don't think it creates the best environment for synergy, innovation, collaboration.
Agreed.
Which, when you're problem solving, it's a huge bonus to have that.
You want to sit in a room like you, Diane, and myself are sitting in the room right now and say, okay, here's my thoughts. I'm not saying I'm right, but here's how I see this. How do both of you see it? And let's bounce ideas off of each other.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So yeah, I think that the impact of the pandemic is not yet behind us.
I agree with you. I feel it's gotten significantly better in the past 12 to 18 months. I'm back in an office most days of the week with that terrible commute from Howell to Southfield.
So that 2D was very adequate for you.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah, working from home was great for me for a while.
Right.
But I agree with you. There's no replacement for the face-to-face interaction, just for team building activities, throwing ideas off of each other. But I agree with you. I don't think we're through it yet. There's still, we here in the automotive industry, there's still pent-up demand for new vehicles. The challenge with that pent-up demand now, we've got very high inflation, very high interest rates. So people that had pent-up demand that were going to buy a vehicle now in the second half of 2023, the thought is, are they going to be able to justify the financing of it when financing goes from 2% to 8%, and when the average price point increases another 10 to 20%. So there's still a lot of uncertainty out there, still a lot to work through. So here's my pitch for anyone that is in high school or coming out of high school to get into supply chain. There's a lot of job security because there is a lot to work on.
Oh, wow. So what does that career path look like?
For me, I knew early on what I wanted to do.
You always wanted to be in supply chain?
Not since birth, but I would say
well, I wouldn't expect it from birth, but that's amazing. I was wondering if I actually had that thought when you said that you started at GM, and I was like, wow, I wonder if he really just always wanted to be in supply chain. Because I can tell you, I did not grow up saying I want to be a Chamber of Commerce director,
But then things happen in life, and you take.
But through exploration,
absolutely. I said I want to go to college, get a degree in something that is pretty diverse, pretty versatile, that I can touch a lot of different areas. So in supply chain, whether it's purchasing or logistics or warehousing, you name it, we touch a lot of different areas of a business. And for me, quite honestly, the program I went to at Western Michigan University was half engineering, half business. At that time, it was one of the first of its kind to combine engineering, business, and then somehow pull all of the supply chain aspects into it. And of course, one of the advertisements was, and it has this high of a starting salary. I go, well, that sounds interesting. So that was part of it. But for me, it's just sometimes I find myself talking about the chaos, but I think I'm wired to be one of those people, and probably the same with both of you, especially in both of your roles, is that I don't run from the fire, I run into the fire, which sounds kind of counterproductive with what we're taught as children. Hey, get away from danger, get away from the chaos. I go, no, it's interesting because you're always learning something new. Mm-hmm. So even though I've been doing this for more than 25 years, every day I learn something new because we talked about being CAPS, problem solvers. What used to solve the problem pre-COVID doesn't necessarily solve the problem now.
But I think that's also what sets you apart from other employees or from other different personalities is that, again, running towards the fire is that problem-solving mentality. Mm-hmm. Whereas running away from the fire, it's self-preservation, which again is not a bad thing.
Right. There's a time and a place for everything.
There is a time and a place for that. But in the business world, you want to be that one that's running towards those fires because not everybody has that drive or that capacity to do that. And every business, there's always going to be fires. And
absolutely.
There has to be people that are willing to take that risk and run in there and try to figure out how to put that fire out and prevent it from coming back, prevent it from starting up again.
Exactly. Learn from that fire.
And grow.
Put it out, grow from it, and then, as you mentioned, Diane, okay, how do we make sure that fire doesn't get rekindled and start burning hot again? Mm-hmm. So it's similar to what you came into at the Howell Chamber. I don't want to say it was on fire, but it was going through a major transition. Mm-hmm. And I look to you and your leadership when you first came on board, and I have to believe you were not 100% aware, even though you went through a very long, lengthy interview process to say, okay, I know exactly what I'm getting into here, because I know within the first couple of months you're thinking, this is not what Jeff and others told me.
Right. Yeah. There were some landmines, but you got to expect that, right? I mean, I think that's when you kind of like you're running towards the fire. Well, this is a new opportunity. It's going to be a learning experience, and you just kind of anticipate the landmines along the way as best you can.
You've done a phenomenal job of navigating around those landmines.
Well, thank you. We've again, like you said, it's not done solely by myself. It's a great team, great board of directors. It's amazing. So it's been an awesome experience too. So I wanted to ask Alan, is there anything that stands out to you in your career? You know, I think that our conversation on supply chain and what you do is fabulous. But again, I think your leadership in your role is probably attributed to a lot of your success and to where you are today. So any kind of almost like I'm going to put you on the spot, like aha moments of, you know, like that have been just kind of a page turner for you, or something that that you could share, maybe based around maybe somebody that you've mentored or coached into a career similar to yours that you felt like, yeah, I'm good here. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be.
No, great question. I always go back to the people aspect of everything I do, whether it's my professional life, my personal life, sitting here with both of you. And you've heard me say this before, so hopefully you don't get sick of me saying this. I always want to leave everybody with a positive impact. Even if it's just a quick 10-second conversation, put a smile on somebody else's face. And at the end of the day, we all still have our businesses to run. We have to bring in more revenue than our costs so we can stay viable and stable. For me, that aha moment came fairly early in my career, in my first leadership role. I always tell people I feel that I'm pretty good at what I do in supply chain, but I really feel my calling is the people leadership aspect of my roles, as far as getting people around the table saying, okay, we've got this really big problem to solve. I don't have the answer by myself. I need other people around me. So I've made conscious and intentional decisions throughout my career to bring people onto my teams that I feel are, you know, at and above my level that I want to learn from. So I always tell people, even though on an org chart you report to me, we're colleagues. I'm not your vice president. I'm your colleague. Trying to really engage with everybody, all the way from one of the greatest compliments, and this is probably the aha moment, is that on one of my performance reviews earlier in my career, somebody said, Alan's the kind of person that can go out on the shop floor, help solve the issue in front of a machine, go in, wash his hands, roll his sleeves back down, and then present the solution to the CEO of the company. And that's something I pride myself on, is working with all levels of the organization. And then when I identify talent, really trying to help that person or multiple people at the same time, help them develop their career to where they want to go. Even if that means they surpass me and I report to them some days. I've had people that have reported to me and I've told them, I'm going to report to you someday, and I'm okay with that.
No, that's amazing. I love that.
I do love that too. I think that is, that's just a great way to invoke that engagement throughout the entire organization. But what is like the number one key component that you look for in somebody and you say, you know what, that's that magic button. That's that magic bean I want to put in the ground.
So over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of people, and I've had the unfortunate opportunity to fire a fair amount of people just based on the lack of performance or whatever the issue may be.
You never fire them, Alan. They fire themselves.
Thank you. Because it's funny you say that, because I still remember every single one of them like it happened this morning, because I feel awful about it. I never want to be disruptive to somebody else's life. I always want to help people out, help them get to where they want to be. But if people, to your point, if they don't want to get there, or if they don't believe in the vision, or if they're not dedicated to the vision that the whole team wants to go, I saw something very recently on LinkedIn. One bad team member can bring the whole team down. And it's very true. I've seen it happen where if you get one bad apple in there that's just negative talk about everything, it can bring everybody around them down.
Absolutely.
Well, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Bingo.
And absolutely. And I just think that there's so much to that is so true, and it can be poison,
Absolutely. So to circle back to answer your question, I always say, okay, there has to be a certain level of capability. They have to have either done the job or have knowledge of the job, or textbook knowledge, real life knowledge. And then to me, what's equally, I'll even say more important, are the personal characteristics. Quite honestly, and it sounds like a soft skill set, but are they a good person? When they saw somebody trying to cross the street and they dropped a bunch of groceries, did they walk right past and ignore that, or did they help the person up and help them get across the street? And you can typically pull that out with a couple of just key questions when you ask somebody, well, what are your interests? And if they're very self-centered interest versus community-oriented or volunteer-oriented, you get the sense pretty quickly, okay, this is the type of good person. They may not be there all the way on the capability scale, but they are all the way there on the character scale. So I guess long answer for, in summary, is really looking at somebody's character and how they carry themselves and how they treat other people.
If somebody's interested, so you did your plug to high school students, and if there is somebody that's interested in that career pathway, is there an opportunity for them to connect with you, to have a discussion, to see, kind of what would be good next steps for them, or career exploration opportunities, or...
Yeah, absolutely. Am I allowed to share my email address?
Yeah, actually, we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
So yeah.
If anybody listening is interested in a career in supply chain, I'm more than happy to have the conversation. Various people in my network have reached out to me before and said, hey, either my friend or relative or some acquaintance is interested. Will you talk to them? I'm always happy to have the conversation. You can either email me, call me, and I'll give you all the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. From my perspective, supply chain is a great career, and again, it's because you're constantly learning. One of the things, and I know that the three of us agree on this, we're all dedicated to being lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. It's not like you stop learning when you graduate high school or college or any type of certification. Every day presents new opportunities to learn, and I feel like supply chain presents many, many of those opportunities every day to learn something new, to be an even better problem solver.
Well, too, and with supply chain, I mean, typically, and maybe this is just my thought process, I'm always thinking big manufacturing. But supply chain is in pretty much every single industry, hospitals,
yes.
Healthcare.
Food source.
Yeah. I mean, even across many other industries, there's always a need for supply chain,
yes.
because you're always churning out some sort of a product, or you need inventory coming in.
Yes.
So...
No, it's a great point, because I thought the same way when I went into my career path. I said, okay, so I want to work for one of the big three, which I had the opportunity to. And then after 8 years, I said, this isn't so great. I want to try still supply chain, but I went from automotive into aerospace. But it's not just big manufacturing, like you said, Diane. It's food sources, hospitals, almost everything we do. We say, okay, we've got a certain budget. We know we have to spend this much. We've got payroll we have to make, and obviously both of you are involved in supply chain from the chamber aspect to say, okay, here's our overall revenue, here's our budget, here's what we need to spend. Great event coming up, Balloon Fest. Okay, so many supply chain things there. It's not big manufacturing, but the supply chain aspect of it is the service supply chain aspect of it. So, no, you're right. So if anyone is afraid of big manufacturing, you can go into supply chain and not go into big manufacturing, because you can go into a lot of different fields within supply chain.
Absolutely. That's so true. So true. So so many different industries. It sounds like there's lots of opportunity there. And I wanted to ask the question too, because you have your crystal ball. I know you do. What are you anticipating for consumer spending? I mean, do you see any kind of long-term price reduction in some of the raw materials that you're buying that might help ease that that pocketbook pain that we're feeling? I don't know. It's kind of a
loaded question,
right? I know.
I'm not a trained economist, but
I told him he was supposed to bring his crystal ball.
I was gonna
rubbing my invisible proverbial crystal ball.
Yeah.
No, like I was saying, I'm not a trained economist. I do have my opinion because I am very close. I'm tied very closely to the raw materials market for aluminum,
It's
magnesium.
strictly opinion based.
Yeah, please don't hold me to this.
We are not
right?
holding you to this.
Please do not make financial investments based on my comments.
We will make that disclosure.
So a lot of times when we see commodity markets come down, it's because, and we just have to use the R word, a recession is foreseen to say, okay, supply out. There's more supply out there than there is demand. So then, of course, people start discounting things, and whether that's aluminum or bread, hopefully eggs sometime soon. I know we talked about eggs this morning, but I do see a lot of the pricing coming down, which is a good thing for our buying power. The challenge is, again, I do see inflation staying up there. I do see rates staying up there. So I think on some of the things we buy in our daily lives, it'll be a good thing. But some of the bigger purchases, whether it's a house, a car, a boat if you like being on the water, those rates are going to stay up there for at least a little while. I do think that the second half of 2023 will be a bit challenging. And whether that's, like I said, somebody trying to buy a house and rates have skyrocketed and price points have skyrocketed. But I do see that stabilizing. But unfortunately for all three of us and everybody listening, probably not until 2024. So my advice to everyone right now is just be strong, be stable for the rest of 2023. It might get a little bit rockier before it smooths out a bit.
Well, we can do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I try to put the positive spin at
I was
that.
going to say that.
It's gonna get better, but I just I'm very optimistic, as you both know, but I also want to be realistic to go. It's not going to be all sunshines and rainbows.
All right. No, it's one of the first calls I had when COVID hit. It was with an all-chamber statewide call, and I just remember one of the chamber execs saying, giving a brief update of where we were at and things that were happening, and just buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
And that turned out to be true.
Yeah. So nothing that we can't handle.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if that's one silver lining with COVID is that everybody has just become so much more flexible and fluid and not married to any one particular outcome because it's just so volatile. Everything is. And you just have to be able to go with the flow. And
I just think about what both of you have been through in the last 2-3 years and how both of you have navigated through a lot from going, so when you joined, Balloon Fest had just ended, and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a great event for years to come. And it is a great event, and it has been since COVID. But in 2020, we're thinking, okay, our biggest event of the year at the Hall Chamber of Commerce is not going to happen. And that's a big revenue stream. So how do we make that up and still operate and stay stable? So I look at that, like I said, not just from an automotive supply chain, but most people, including everybody in this room, navigates through some very challenging, unknown situations, and somehow we find a way to figure it out. And to your point, Diane, we don't like it at the time. It's like taking medicine, but we later on, after the fact, we are stronger because of what we went through.
Absolutely. I love it. That's great. Alan, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your leadership and for sharing some insights on not only your career path, but our supply chain.
Absolutely. And I want to thank both of you for your leadership and everything that both of you do for the local community, for the Howell Chamber of Commerce. And all of the interactions are always very optimistic, very positive, even when we have some not so great news about some of the challenges. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with both of you today.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate that.
All right. And with that, we hope you enjoyed listening today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.